So we're going to talk to Bill Shepperd of Sun Microsystems about OCAP. And of course, OCAP is based on Java. And one of the things that he keyed in on was the whole idea of this being used in IPTV. So if you could kind of talk a little bit about how IPTV providers could get the benefits of what's going on in OCAP and Java, that'd be great.
So OCAP is based on a family of specifications called GEM, Globally Executable MHP, which is not the most friendly of acronyms, so we're just going to call it GEM. And so the point of GEM is to allow the same Java-based apps to run across different devices running on different infrastructures. So MHP was the first GEM-based spec, and that was targeted for primarily Europe and Asia, free-to-air satellite and terrestrial and cable. But not OCAP cable. And then CableLabs standardized on GEM for OCAP, so that took the same basic content environment but then customized it for the needs of the cable market in terms of what they use for signaling and metadata, guide data, that kind of thing. And then Blu-ray disc did the same thing but tweaked it to reflect the fact that the content's coming off of an optical disc rather than coming over a cable line or a satellite dish. So for IPTV, it's the same basic idea. There is a GEM spec called GEM-IPTV, which takes the same set of APIs for how you do the user interface and the remote control and all the sorts of things that a developer of an app would use, and also then specifies signaling that's appropriate to IPTV, the fact that it's an IP network rather than an RF network or a terrestrial network. And so for content which is really bound to the program, interactive games, sports, news, all those sorts of things, or even unbound content like solitaire or Sudoku, which is not really tied to the network itself, but just needs a screen and the ability to maybe send data back and forth. All of those things could easily run across all of these devices without having to change. And so we've seen the telcos, a number of the providers of middleware, Mirio, Siemens being probably the most prominent, already have Java-based middleware that was developed before GEM IPTV was available, so it's similar to the OCAP stack, but the content isn't going to be compatible. Most of them are migrating over to a full GEM-based spec. So I think we'll see a world in a few years when you've got tens of millions of OCAP boxes and lots of content targeting that the telcos who have IPTV-based solutions will have architected the ability to support that same content on whatever platform they happen to be using.
So for an independent telco, the key thing is if they're going IPTV is make sure their suppliers or middleware suppliers have this migration path to GEM.
At least they should have Java in their roadmap. It can coexist. Even someone using Microsoft's Media Room, there's absolutely no reason that environment can't also support the ability to run a Java VM and support that GEM content. So certainly that should be a checklist item for the providers of middleware is what's your roadmap with regards to supporting GEM content.
And one of the neat things about this, what was really exciting, was this whole thing of Blu-ray and the fact that you've got the studios and their creative minds behind it. And you gave an example of Cars and how they're using metadata there. If you could kind of talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So Cars is one of the recent releases from Disney, and it's a fabulous title. Just the Pixar content is always great, but it just cries out for the interactive capabilities that Blu-ray provides. So in this case, they have a feature called Car Finder, and throughout the entire movie, you can bring up a panel that will show 5 different cars, and it changes as you're going, and each has a little number above it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and when you see one of those cars on screen, you hit the number, and it puts it into your car locker, and there's 217 different cars that have all backstories and all this data around them. So as you're watching the movie, you want to catch each one. At any time, you can go to the car locker, find out the whole character, see the car spinning in 3D, what's its name, and so this really engages the viewer with the movie much more, especially the kids, but even the adults have loved this particular feature. And some of the cars are only on for a fraction of a second, so it's really not just like a toddler thing. I mean, this requires some real attention and skill. And so that sort of app, it's a GEM application, so that could easily be migrated to this content as it's provided through video on demand on a telco-based system. The work to actually re-author this would be very, very trivial, almost incidental. And so as the studios start looking at taking this higher value content that they've put out on Blu-ray disc, the business model will certainly emerge to offer that to the content providers or the carriers and offer it maybe on a 24-hour basis for an extra couple bucks over what just the movie itself would be. and of course they can update that content live. So it's, I think, going to be a very compelling business argument both for the studios because they get more outlets and more content to provide through those outlets, and especially for the carriers because content is the key, and there will always be value add here with additional revenue that goes with it.
And that's just one example of many that can flourish in this environment.
Right. I think the next few years will be amazing to see what the studios come out with and how they find ways to really add stuff to those movies and build that relationship with the consumer.
Well, Bill, thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure.